Hi friends, it's Mr. Stokely back again. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the media specialist here at Carnegie Elementary, which means I run the library and I've got 20,000 great books for you when you get back to school. And for those of you that do know me, just know that I miss you very much and I can't wait to get you all back. So today, I picked out one of my favorite books, and you've probably read the book or seen the movie because it's been in the news a lot lately. It's called Jumanji by Mr. Van Allsburg, and he's also the illustrator of the book as well. And you'll notice here it's got a golden seal that's called the Caldecott, and the Caldecott is given not for the story but for the illustrations. So if you'll think of the medal in terms of the Olympic medals, gold is always first place, silver is second, bronze is third. This book got first place in illustrations in the year that it was published. So that tells you that the illustrations are wonderful. So Mr. Van Allsburg, Chris Van Allsburg's his name actually, he's a very talented writer and illustrator. You don't see that very often. So I'm going to go ahead and read Jumanji to you, and I hope you enjoy it. Here we go. Jumanji. I'm going to flip the computer around like this and just make sure you can see the pictures. I'll make sure I try to get it all on the screen. Bear with me a second. Here we go. Okay. Now remember, Mom said, your father and I are bringing home some guests by after the opera, so please keep the house neat. Quite so, said Dad, tucking his scarf inside his coat. Mom looked into the hallway mirror and she carefully pinned her hat in place. Then she knelt and kissed both her children goodbye. And when the front door closed, Judy and Peter giggled with delight. They all took their toys out of their toy chest and they made a terrible mess. But their laughter slowly turned to silence till Peter slouched into a chair. You know what? Peter said. I'm really bored. Well, me too, said Judy. Why don't we go outside and play for a while? Peter agreed. So they set out across the street to the park. It was cold for November. The children could see their breath like steam. They rolled in the leaves, and when Judy tried to stuff some leaves down Peter's sweater, he jumped up and ran behind a tree. And when his sister caught up with him, he was kneeling at the foot of the tree looking at a long, thin box. What is that? Asked Judy. Huh, it kind of looks like a board game, said Peter, handing her the box. Jumanji, Judy read from the box, a jungle adventure game. Why, look, said Peter, pointing to a note taped to the bottom of the box. In a childlike handwriting were the words, free game fun for some, but not for all. P.S. Read the instructions carefully. Want to take it home? Said Judy. Yeah, not really, said Peter. I'm sure someone left it here because it's so boring. Oh, come on, said Judy. Let's give it a try. Race you home. And off she ran with Peter at her heels. Well, at home, the children spread the game out onto a card table. It looked very much like all the games they already had. There was a board that unfolded, revealing a path of colored squares. The squares had messages written on them. The path started in the deepest jungle and ended up in Jumanji, a city of golden buildings and towers. Peter began to shake the dice and play with the other pieces that were in the box. Put those down and listen, said Judy. I'm going to read the instructions. Jumanji, a young people's jungle adventure especially designed for the bored and restless. Number 1. Player selects pieces and places it in the deepest jungle. Number 2. Player rolls the dice and moves a piece along the path through the dangers of the jungle. Number 3. Player who reaches Jumanji and yells the city's name aloud first is the winner. Well, is that all? Asked Peter, sounding disappointed. No, said Judy. There's one more thing, and this is in capital letters. That must mean it's important. Number 4, very important. Once a game of Jumanji is started, it won't be over until one of the players reaches the Golden City. Oh, big deal, said Peter, who gave a bored yawn. Here, said Judy, handing him the dice. You go first. Peter casually dropped the dice from his hand. 7, said Judy. Peter moved his piece to the 7th square. Lion attacks. Move back 2 spaces, read Judy. Gosh, how exciting, said Peter in a very unexcited voice. As he reached for his piece, he looked up at his sister. She had a look of absolute horror on her face. Peter, turn around and look real slowly. The boy turned in his chair and he couldn't believe his eyes. Lying on the piano was a lion, staring at Peter and licking his lips. The lion roared so loud that it knocked Peter right off of his chair. The big cat jumped to the floor. Peter was up on his feet, running through the house with the lion a whisker's length behind. He ran upstairs and dove under a bed. The lion tried to squeeze under, but he got his head stuck. Peter scrambled out, ran from the bedroom, and slammed the door behind him. He stood in the hall with Judy, gasping for breath. I don't think, said Peter in between gasps of air, that I want to play this game anymore. But we've got to, said Judy as she helped her brother Peter back downstairs. I'm sure that's what the instructions mean. That lion's not going to go away until one of us wins the game. Well, Peter stood next to the card table. Can't we just call the zoo and have him taken away? Well, from upstairs came the sounds of growling and clawing at the bedroom door. Or maybe we could wait until Daddy gets home. Well, no one would come to the zoo because they wouldn't believe us, said Judy. And you know how upset Mom would be if there was a lion in the bedroom. We started this game, and now we've got to finish it. Peter looked down at the game board. What if Judy rolled a 7? Then there'd be 2 lions. For an instant, Peter thought he was going to cry. Then he sat firmly in his chair and he said, all right, let's play. So Gigi picked up the dice and she rolled an 8, and she moved her piece. Monkey steal food. Miss 1 turn, she read. And from the kitchen came the sounds of banging pots and falling jars. The children ran in to see a dozen monkeys tearing the room apart. Oh boy, said Peter. This would upset Mom even more than the lion. Quick, said Judy, back to the game. Peter took his turn. Thank heavens he landed on a blank space. So he rolled again. Monsoon season begins. Lose 1 turn. Little raindrops began falling in the living room. Then a roll of thunder shook the walls and scared the monkeys and scattered them out of the kitchen. The rain began to fall in buckets as Judy took the dice. Guide gets lost. Lose 1 turn. Well, the rain suddenly stopped. The children turned to see a man hunched over a map. Oh dear, I say, I'm in a spot of bad luck now, he said. Perhaps a left turn here, then... No, a right turn here. Yes, absolutely. I think a right turn, or maybe... excuse me, said Judy, but the guy just ignored her. Around here, then over... No, over here and around this. Oh, yes, good. But then, Judy shrugged her shoulders and handed the dice to Peter. 4, 5, 6, he counted. Bitten by tsetse fly. Contract sleeping sickness. Lose 1 turn. Judy heard a faint buzzing noise and watched a small insect land on Peter's nose. Peter lifted his hand to brush the bug away, but then stopped, gave a tremendous yawn, and fell sound asleep, his head on the table. Peter, wake up, said Judy. But it was no use. She grabbed the dice and moved to a blank. She rolled again and waited in amazement. Rhinoceros stampede! Go back 2 spaces! Well, as fast as he had gone to sleep, Peter woke. Together they listened to the rumble in the hallway, and it grew louder and louder. Suddenly, a herd of rhinos charged through the living room and into the dining room, crushing all the furniture in their path. Peter and Judy covered their ears as sounds of splintering wood and breaking china filled the house. Peter, he gave the dice a quick tumble. Python sneaks into camp! Go back a space! Judy shrieked and jumped up on her chair. Over the fireplace, said Peter. Judy sat down again, nervously looking at the 8-foot snake that was wrapping itself around the mantel clock. The guide looked up from his map, took one look at the snake, and moved to the far corner of the room, joining the monkeys on the couch. John took her turn and landed on a blank space. Her brother took the dice and rolled a 3. Oh no, he said, volcano erupts! Go back 3 spaces! The room became warm and started to shake a little. Molten lava poured out of the fireplace opening. It hit the water on the floor of the room. It filled with steam. Judy rolled the dice and she moved ahead. Discover shortcut! Roll again, oh dear, she cried. Judy saw the snake unwrapping himself from the clock. If you roll a 12, you can get us out of the jungle, said Peter. Oh, please, 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 Judy begged as she took the dice. The snake was wriggling his way to the floor. She dropped the dice from her hand. 1 6, then another. Judy grabbed her piece and slammed it to the board. Jumanji! She yelled as loud as she could. The steam in the room became thicker and thicker. Judy couldn't even see across the table. Then, as if all the doors and windows had been opened, a cool breeze cleared the steam from the room. Everything was just as it had been before the game. There were no monkeys, no guide, no water, no broken furniture, no snake, no lion roaring upstairs, no rhinos. Without saying a word to each other, Peter and Judy threw the game into its box. They bolted out the door, ran across the street to the park, and they dropped the game under a tree. Back at home, they quickly put their toys away. Both children were too excited to sit quietly, so Peter took out a picture puzzle. And as they fit the pieces together, their excitement turned to relief and then exhaustion. With the puzzle half done, Peter and Judy fell sound asleep on the sofa. Wake up, dears, Mother's voice called. Judy opened up her eyes. Mom and Dad had just returned and their guests were arriving. Judy gave Peter a nudge to wake him up. Yawning and stretching, they got to their feet. Mom introduced them to some of the guests and said, Did you guys have an exciting afternoon? Oh, yes, said Peter. We had a flood, a stampede, a volcano. I got sleeping sickness, and... Peter was interrupted by the adults laughing. Oh, well, said Mom, I think you both got sleeping sickness. Why don't you go upstairs and put your PJs on? Then you can finish your puzzle and have some dinner. Well, when Peter and Judy came back downstairs, they found that Father had moved the puzzle to the den. While the children were working on it, one of the guests, Miss Budwing, she brought them a tray of food. Wow, that's such a hard puzzle, she said to the children. Daniel and Walter are always starting puzzles and never finishing them. Daniel and Walter were Miss Budwing's sons. They never read instructions either. Oh well, said Miss Budwing, turning to rejoin the guests. I guess they'll learn. Both children answered, I sure hope so. But they weren't looking at Miss Budwing. They were looking out the window. 2 boys were running through the park. It was Danny and Walter Budwing. And Danny had a long, skinny box underneath his arm. And that's the story of Jumanji by Chris Van Allsburg. What do you suppose was in that box? Well, I think you know what it was, and those boys never read the instructions. Woo! Well, my friends, I hope you enjoyed that one. I miss you, and for those of you who don't know me yet, I can't wait to see you either. So I'll be back soon with another good story. Bye for now, my friends.